we're going straight to the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, this morning to talk not so much about the storm outside. We've spoken to Civil Defence this morning, but the financial storm that you are feeling at home this morning. From a squeeze to a crunch, that's how some economists are describing the pressure on household budgets as mortgage costs shoot up. Chris Hipkins is with us live. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you know how much extra Kiwis are going to be putting onto their mortgages this year because of the increase in interest costs, mortgage costs, for your average Kiwi?
It's likely to be significant. It has a very uneven impact across households because of the nature of the way fixed interest rates work. So we know we've got a lot of people coming off fixed interest rates this year and quite a few towards the end of last year, and they might be moving from interest rates that are sort of sitting at around 2.5% to interest rates that might be sitting closer to 6%. So that's likely to have a significant impact on those households.
That's
They're
massive,
likely to
right?
see their mortgage repayments.
That's massive. For someone who bought...
Potentially at least double.
Totally. So huge pressure on them. For someone who bought a house in 2020, fixed for 2 years, in Auckland, for example, that's more than $800 a fortnight that they're having to find from behind the back of a sofa. So people are looking to you, and they're looking to what the government is spending its money on their behalf. How much money was wasted on the RNZ-TVNZ merger?
I don't, as I said, we haven't got a final number on the amount
What's
of
the
money
preliminary number
that's been invested there. That won't be. Well, we still needed to invest some money in shoring up the future of Radio New Zealand in particular.
Do you know any number?
Because the media landscape has changed significantly.
Yep.
Now, I haven't got a number off the top of my head for that.
Because the Ministry for Culture
changed significantly.
The Ministry for Culture and Heritage says it's $16 million at least. Have you not heard that number before? Is this the first time you're hearing it?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's all money wasted. We have to consider what the future of Radio New Zealand is going to be. They're a broadcaster that relies exclusively on the government for their revenue, and the media landscape's changed significantly. So we did need to actually take some time to make sure that we're investing in the right area to prepare Radio New Zealand for the future. Television New Zealand is in a slightly different position in the sense that some of the worst case scenario forecasts around their commercial revenue haven't eventuated, and they're actually in a reasonably good position at the moment. So the case is less pressing there. That doesn't mean, though, that we're not going to be back talking about that in the future. Many media outfits, including your own, are finding that advertising revenue is declining, and that's going to result in some difficult decisions needing to be made in the future.
Are you saying that some of the money that was spent investigating a merger between two entities, which is no longer going to happen, that some of that money may somehow be used for something else?
No, well, the work that's been done there will inform the decisions that we make in the future. I'm not looking backwards on this, though.
No, I know you don't want to look backwards, Prime Minister. I know you don't want to look backwards, but Kiwis do, because this is important. You're trying to suggest to us that some of the $16 million that was spent on a failed merger will somehow benefit an organisation which is funded by the taxpayer, and that money has already been sunk.
Well, the work that's been done includes things like looking at what the future needs are when it comes to public media content. What needs to change in the way our public broadcasters, TVNZ and RNZ operate in the future.
It was all geared towards a merger, wasn't it?
Well, the merger was the recommendation that came from that process. That's not what we've decided to do.
Okay, so you don't concede at this point that you've wasted any money. You've gone ahead with the policy, you've reversed it, and we've lost nothing.
Well, like I said, my focus is on how do we get the best bang for buck for the taxpayers from the position that we are in now. And my view, and the view of the Cabinet, is that actually we can resource Radio New Zealand to make sure that it can preserve at least the status quo and potentially add some additional content to its offering. Television New Zealand's in a reasonably stable position at the moment, and so it should continue in that way.
Okay, so this is step one of the so-called bonfire of policy reversals. Do you know how much in total taxpayer money will have been wasted by the time you're done with this?
Look, I don't agree with the characterisation that you're making there. There are some difficult decisions that we've got to take as a country, and making sure that we get those decisions right involves some upfront investment. So if you look at Three Waters, for example, we're talking about $130 to $180 billion worth of investment required in our water infrastructure over the next 30 years, spending a bit of money to make sure that we're investing that in the right places in the most efficient way possible, I think will be money well spent. We've got to make sure we get this right.
Agreed with that, but $21 million on consultants for Three Waters alone, you've gotten this far with it, and now you're going to change what you're doing. Do you not concede that you're wasting money in this process? You must, surely. No, as I've said, we've got to make sure that we're canvassing all of the options and that we're getting the best one and getting the best outcome for New Zealanders in terms of their rates. Ratepayers could end up paying thousands of dollars a year extra on their rates if we don't get this right. We've got to make sure that we are looking at the evidence about how to do that. Now, if you consider the amount of money that's been spent so far in the context of up to $180 billion worth of investment required, actually spending a tiny fraction of that to make sure that we're getting those future investment decisions right is money well spent. Do you know how much extra the government's making in terms of inflation on income tax as people creep into higher brackets which haven't been changed, and GST on inflated prices? Have you asked that?
I haven't got an exact breakdown, but I've seen some of the media commentary around that, and I think it's important to note that the government's revenue growth overall in the 5 years that we've been in government includes more people paying tax, overall salaries going up, and it's not just inflationary pressure or bracket creep that's contributing to that. That's actually probably the minority of the increase in revenue.
So the fact that in 2021 you were about $97 billion, that going up by forecast this year by $20 billion. You're saying not much of that has to do with inflation, yet people are paying more because their wages have gone up. So have you asked your officials or your ministers to look at adjusting the tax brackets?
I'm not going to make up tax policy here right now. Of course, tax policy is something that we look at regularly. But I'd also note that as household costs have gone up, so too have the government's costs gone up. So it costs more to educate a child now than it did 5 years ago. It costs more for us to provide the health services that we provided 5 years ago. And we have to make sure that we're continuing to deliver the public services that New Zealanders want as well. So that has an impact on us. And, we have to get that revenue from somewhere in order to be able to provide those public services.
Absolutely, Prime Minister. Not asking you to make up tax policy this morning, but I asked, have you asked any of your ministers or officials to look at potential changes to tax brackets?
Well, as I've said, I'm not going to get into budget speculation or writing the tax policy or the budgets, the tax policy for the budget or anything like that this morning.
I'm not asking you to.
Tax policy is something that gets regularly reviewed.
I'm not asking you to. I'm simply asking whether you've asked for advice. Yes or no?
As you know, we don't publicly comment on things that may or may not be under consideration in the budget, never have, and don't intend to start doing that now. People will know exactly what our tax policy is well in advance of the election, though.
All right, Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time. I understand you've got to get to, or you were hoping to get to Wellington for Cabinet, but you'll have to stay here and do it via Zoom today because of the weather.
I am indeed stuck in Auckland today.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That is the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins.